Good morning, everybody. I think we can start, especially that we have 1 hour for the whole discussion, so it's not a lot, but the topic is very interesting, so it's my big pleasure to welcome you all to the next part of today's event. And it's going to be a very interesting and timely panel discussion called Clean Industrial Deal and Industry's Perspective on Turning Ambitions into Actions. So today's event has been organized together with Business and Science Poland, which I'm a representative of, Danfoss, and the Polish Confederation Lewiatan. So, okay, that's not for me, but it's perfect timing. So over the next hour, we'll have a chance to discuss the topic of the Clean Industrial Deal, but what I find extremely interesting is going to be mostly from the perspective of the industry. So making sure that we can stress test a little bit those proposals from the European Commission and see how it's being perceived by different companies, industries, associations that will be impacted by those policies. So in particular, we would like to focus on this perspective of the industry, then also, which is very important, on the role of the local supply chains. So how those local supply chains can contribute to this journey that we have to do as the European Union. And last but not least, also the issue of funding, right? So how to make sure that the significant and precisely designed funding mechanism at the EU level can support this transition. And I think we can all agree that this is a very challenging topic. It's a big challenge that we have to address, how to make sure that this achieving the climate goals and climate targets that as a EU we have agreed to can be reached, but at the same time to make sure that we can boost the competitiveness of the European Union. And me, myself, as a representative of Business and Science Poland, which is an association representing in Brussels companies in discussions with the EU, I can say that we are ready. We are ready to take part in this journey to make sure that we can both decarbonize and also boost the competitiveness of the European Union. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. And we have a great lineup of panelists to discuss all of that. But before we go to the panel discussion, it's my big pleasure to welcome to the stage Mr. Maciej Witucki, the president of the Polish Confederation Lewiatan, to share some views from his perspective. Maciej, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And very sorry, I was supposed to take active role in the panel, but I will immediately take a plane because we have a Business Europe meeting with President von der Leyen this afternoon. So I just have a speech. Hopefully it's a short one, but giving some intro and setting some framework to the very much discussion. So very happy to be here in Rzeszów, a city which is next to the border, next to the war zone, but city also then a symbol of solidarity and symbol of cooperation between the countries. Poland, we made a remarkable journey from the accession to the EU, proving how much the accession can bring to the country. We are embracing the single market. The EU founding and commitment to the EU rule of law transformed our country, transformed our economy. You have seen it, but now it's our active role to support the next stage and the clean deal, the clean transformation, while keeping the competitiveness of the European industry. This is one of our obvious priorities. So during the Polish presidency, we worked to ensure that very hardly to ensure that the European business, and we will continue to do so after the presidency as well, that we stay globally competitive. We have been obviously focusing on cutting the red tape, on simplifying the regulation on both national level, but also as much as possible on, as I say, re-regulating on the European level. Deregulation is a bit of an aggressive word, so we try to name it re-regulating, so regulating a better way, but also using the full potential of the single market. So competitiveness today is a key word, and we see it with all those global challenges we have with our friends, allies, but also more and more commercial competitors. So we will be pushing it for the last days of the presidency, but we also, as a Polish business, but also as European business, Business Europe, we will continue to strengthen it and to support it. Now, looking ahead, Business Europe at the members, Confederation Lewiatan is one of the members, obviously. We have adopted the Copenhagen Declaration 2 weeks ago, a call of action grounded in the one simple truth.
Session are starting. Please take your seats in each panel room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeżeli Państwo sale panelowe się rozpoczęły, zapraszamy.
Thank you. So we are good students. We are on time, and we already started. Congratulations to the people in the room. So getting back to the Copenhagen Declaration, we clearly said Europe must act with unity and urgency to strengthen its economy and global position. No doubts, and brings me to the subject of this panel, Clean Industrial Deal, perspective on tuning ambitions into actions. Ambitions is something which have been very much used in the Green Deal philosophy. And we business, we are by definition ambitious. But our main call today, it's not to stay only with ambitions. We are used to have plans. We used to have plans with milestones, with achievable goals, which have been cross-checked with reality, and with budgets behind to support those plans. So I think the most important element for us on this clean industrial deal, which is a beginning, which is only a beginning of the transformation towards the competitive Europe, it's really to discuss with business, and it's good that we have this kind of meetings, and it's good that we have a strong opening on the Commission side. My meeting this afternoon with President von der Leyen is a good example that the doors are much more open to the voice of business than it used to be in the past, because we want to save the planet. We want to participate in this green revolution, but again, not at the level of ambitions, political ambitions, at the level of the targets, which will keep us competitive. So we need to have a competitive cross-check at every single point of this green transformation, but also with the roadmaps and especially with the budget. So we need those plans, we need the targets which are achievable, and we need the secured budgets to match, unlike the Green Deal, which will then translate the wording of ambitions towards the achievements. So the Clean Industrial Deal, together with the Action Plan for Affordable Energy.
To the parliament rooms now. The sessions are starting. Thank you.
Just in case some.
Państwo, rozpoczynamy panele. Już teraz zapraszamy.
Okay. At least they are not calling that Mr. Witucki should stop to speak. So again, Europe cannot lead this green transition if it loses its industrial capacity in the process. It's extremely important. So we are all for the clean industrial deal, but it has to be industrial and it has to be competitive. So the Polish Confederation Lewiatan, with Business Europe and its members, we stand ready to actively engage in this with all EU institutions to discuss forward. And to finish, because will be called by the loudspeakers, I will just quote Jean Monnet. Europe will be forged in crises and will be the sum of the solutions adopted for those crises. And I really believe that all the pressures we have today from the transatlantic, from Russia, from China, they are really pushing us to act faster. So I'm very happy that we'll have, and I hope we'll have a very fruitful panel to bring very concrete milestones which are fitting our green ambitions, but filling them with plans, with budgets, and with the targets which will still keep Europe competitive, because this is the last moment to keep this competitiveness, because we will not be capable to transform Europe without the taxes, and taxes are coming from the companies, from the industries remaining competitive. Otherwise, we'll have no means for this transformation. So thank you for the invitation. I will bring this voice to Brussels quasi immediately, and all the best for the panelists. And we keep Europe green, but we keep Europe competitive, because we need means to turn it green. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maciej. It was very insightful. So definitely some of the topics we'll tackle during today's panel discussion. But before we move to the panel discussion, we are also very happy to have with us Ms. Andrea Voigt, Vice President of Danfoss Climate Solutions, Public Affairs and Sustainability. And Andrea will present a case study from Danfoss, how Danfoss is really right now contributing to this transition that we as the EU have to go through. So Andrea, welcome to the stage and the floor is yours.
Okay, good. Does this work? Yes. So good morning, everyone, and very happy to be here and to present to you about competitive decarbonization. So showing that decarbonization is really also an opportunity for industry and should be seen as an opportunity for industry. So I'm going to stand here on this side because yesterday I was a little bit annoyed when people were sitting all the time in front of the slides and you could actually not see half of the slides. So I'm standing here on the side and I hope that's okay for everyone. So before I get started, just 2 words about Danfoss. Danfoss is a global company active on all 3 regions of the world, the Americas, Europe and Asia, as you can see. We have nearly 40,000 employees and a turnover of nearly 10 billion euro. We are structured into 3 business segments, power solutions, which is a lot about industrial hydraulics, construction machinery. We have climate solutions, heating and cooling, that's the segment where I belong to. And we have power electronics and drives, which is very much about electrification and making electrification energy efficient. So what I wanted to show here and what I wanted to do is bring a positive message and show that decarbonization is possible and that it is definitely an opportunity for industry and for the economy as well, besides, of course, the environment and the people. And it's based, in Danfoss we see this based on our own experience on these 3 key pillars that you see here. One being saving energy, basically, or energy efficiency, if you want to call it differently. Then electrification, and then integration. And all those 3 principles, we have applied them in our own production sites to really have hands-on experience with this. So this is just 3 very important numbers to show and to actually make the potential of decarbonization tangible. There is this huge number of 22.6 billion euro that could be saved annually if simply we applied variable speed drives in industry. Nearly 40% of the EU's industrial process heat could be met by heat pumps, readily available technology which can be really used tomorrow and which would tremendously increase energy efficiency and also decrease our dependence on fossil fuels. And 13% of the EU's industrial heat demand could be met by excess heat. So that's all the waste heat that is generated by industrial processes, by cooling processes as well, which could actually be recovered and reused. So those are 3 quite impressive numbers, which are not necessarily seen in the way they can act. So this is, making this a little bit more explicit, even in terms of increasing the energy efficiency with this example of variable speed drives. If they were implemented throughout, we could save 120 terawatt hours, so that's 10% of the EU's energy efficiency target. As I was saying already, heat pumps up to 200 degrees could deliver nearly 40% of the process heat requirements, and decarbonizing industrial process heat is one of the very big opportunities that we have if we want to meet our energy and climate goals. And then the last point on the waste heat, which is a very impressive one as well, is that by simply recovering waste heat or excess heat, as we like to call it, we could cover 13% of the industrial heat demand. And that's actually, those points together would of course then decrease our dependence on fossil fuels and would make us much more resilient. This is just to show, as I was saying, nearly 40% of the industrial process heat could be met by heat pumps. And if you look at the degrees on the right-hand side, this is for temperatures up to 200 degrees. And it's really, this is standard technology. So it's not something that needs to be developed or something where a lot of fine-tuning is still necessary. Those technologies are readily available and can be used tomorrow. Certainly up until 100 degrees off the shelf and 200 degrees, all the technologies are there. So we could really immediately decarbonize with industrial heat pumps. And that's also to show how heat pumps can be integrated into a broader context. And I'll show an example afterwards, after the example of our own factory, where you can also use this technology at facilities where you would have both heating and cooling needs. Because if you integrate the heat recovery then with the heat pump, then you can recover the heat from the cooling and you can use it for heating purposes. So it's kind of really a closed loop, a great circular application of temperature. So huge opportunities there. But now to show you an example, this is our factory, and I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. You excuse me for that, but it's about 30, 40 kilometers from Warsaw. It's our factory where we produce components for indoor heating and cooling applications. It has 3 production halls. Part of it is brand new, 82 production lines, and a size of 37,400 square meters in total. So there, as we did, also, or as we are doing throughout our production sites, we applied what I was showing earlier, the principle of saving energy, of electrification, electrifying heat, and of integrating. So first of all, in terms of increasing the efficiency, a very simple thing to do is to switch off machines when they are not in use. So that's certainly not rocket science, but it saves a lot of energy and a lot of money. And then implement variable speed drives. In this case, 16 variable speed drives were installed in the new hall to control the motor speed. And that's simply to make sure that the motor is not running at full speed all the time. And that saves a lot of energy. It's not rocket science, but it's super efficient. We want to roll this out throughout all of our factories, about 100 factories, and that, once done, would save us 3 to 5 million euros in operational cost every year. So really a massive potential here. Then if we look at the electrification, so again, at this factory here in Poland, there were heat pumps installed, in this case air-to-water heat pumps, to heat in the winter and to support the cooling in the summer, because heat pumps, despite their names, they can do both, heating and cooling. And those heat pumps have a seasonal coefficient of performance of 3.8 in this case, so it's not a super high efficient of performance, but it's a very good one. And already with this, we are like nearly 4 times more efficient than a typical fossil fuel boiler. So huge opportunities, huge savings possible here. And then in terms of the integration, what I said earlier of recovering the waste heat or the excess heat from production processes, etc., or in this case here from air handling units, again, reusing this waste heat on the site in order to heat the water and the air which is used in the building. So that heat does not need to be produced in the first place because it's there already. It does not need to be bought. So it's a really good opportunity again to save energy and to save cost. So with this entire approach, the expectation is to save 1.8 million kilowatt hours per year on electricity and gas, and 420,000 euro in terms of the energy bill reduction. And all of this, and that's where it's really competitive, I would say, with a payback time of less than 2.5 years. So payback below 3 years, which is, I think, definitely competitive. I wanted to show one other case, which is not in our own facilities, but where we worked closely together with a brewery in the Netherlands, the Gulpener Brewery, is a very good beer. And in breweries, typically, you have both heating and cooling processes. And what we did here together with the customer was to see how can we basically use the synergies between those processes. And what they did was to install heat pumps to remove the fossil fuel boilers and install heat pumps in order to cover the heating and the cooling needs in combination with heat recovery. So by doing that, again, there is an expectation to save 75% of natural gas use and to save, of course, money. And on top of that, they could use a natural refrigerant. So really a very good example of how you can combine heating and cooling processes. I'm not going to go through this because we don't have time, and I think we will tackle that in the panel discussion. But what I would really like to repeat here is that we have definitely technologies that are available, that are existing already, and that we can use immediately to save both energy and money and to reduce the emissions. Electrification is a huge potential, and even more so, or at least as much potential, the waste heat, excess heat recovery from processes or from cooling or from both, which can be used directly on site. And there is also the combination then where we can use heat pumps to bring the level of the temperature from the waste heat or from the excess heat to the level of temperature needed. So really a closed loop, if I can say so, where we have tremendous opportunities to decarbonize in a very competitive way, which is good for industry, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, very much. You can stay. I think that thank you very much for a lot of food for thought and definitely some topics that we will discuss in a few seconds. So now it's my big pleasure to invite to the stage our great panelists to discuss all of those topics. Andrea, you can stay. But we have with us also today Ms. Mariella Masselink, Head of Unit in Industrial Forum Alliances and Clusters, DG GROW, European Commission. We have with us Mr. Łukasz Kotapski, the Vice President of the Management Board of the Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu. Łukasz, take your seat and you can the mics. We have Luisa Santos, Deputy Director-General at Business Europe. Luisa, welcome to the stage. And last but not least, we have with us also Sonia Buchholtz, Director at the Polish think tank Forum Energii. So Sonia, welcome to the stage. And I think we can start. So as I said, there are a lot of topics to discuss. Unfortunately, we have around 40 minutes. So I will ask all of you, if it's possible, of course, to try to stay concise and brief with the discussions, and we will try to make this discussion as interactive as possible. Maybe some housekeeping rules. We'll start with some questions for everybody, but at some point I'll be happy also to open the discussions to the audience. So if you have any questions or you would like to ask any questions, feel free to start working on that, and at some point definitely we will get 2 or 3 questions from the audience, and then we'll finish with a one fireside chat question for everybody. But having this opportunity to have in the room the representative of the European Commission, I think it's a great opportunity. If you, Mariella, could set the scene, in particular as the main topic of today's discussion is the Clean Industrial Deal, and tell us a little bit more, but in a nutshell, of the rationale behind the Clean Industrial Deal and its role in getting this, what I like in Andrea's presentation, this competitive decarbonization process. So, Mariella.
Indeed, many thanks for having us here today. Indeed, for the framework, so to say, the background of the Clean Industrial Deal. You know that we have presented it in February this year. And I would say it is really our centerpiece of what we call our competitiveness compass, our Choose Europe agenda in the European Commission. It is to support companies, investors to choose Europe as their business location. And in that sense, indeed, the objective of the Clean Industrial Deal is to bring together our competitiveness objectives, decarbonization, but also economic security, because the topic of course, strategic independence also comes into play here. And in this sense, I think it is exactly right what Andrea said. It is about making a business case for decarbonization in this context. It focuses on two key areas. On the one hand, energy-intensive industries, and on the other hand, and closely related clean tech sectors. And in this sense, I think on the energy-intensive industries, is it obvious they are in particularly challenging situation, a relatively complex regulatory framework, competition and high energy prices. So we need to work on that front with the Affordable Energy Action Plan that we have put forward. But at the same time, there is also a need to roll out and to boost the renewable and the clean tech sector. And that we want to do via, for example, the Decarbonization Accelerator Act. So that will work on faster, quicker permitting, for example, and we have that coming forward still this year. Then we also want to work on the state aid framework, because we also need to mobilize national funding in these critical sectors. And we need to roll out the energy grid, increase interconnectedness to ensure electrification. And I think last but not least, also a point to mention that is key in this context, to boost the clean tech sector, we also need to increase demand for these areas. That's part of the business case. And here we can, for example, work, and we have that in the pipeline, a review of our public procurement framework to ensure that we have conditions linked to sustainability, but also to resilience and to local content. And I think that is key. And beyond that, but I will not go into more detail due to the time, but the Clean Industrial Deal also, of course, looks at other elements of the business case, of making the business case, investments, skills, circularity, and also international partnerships. But I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mariella. I will have a couple of follow-up questions for that, because I think you opened a couple of interesting topics there. But first, I would like to ask Łukasz. Łukasz, if you could, Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu, Industrial Development Agency, I think it's a very interesting entity, because you are involved in the process of decarbonization on many different levels, right? So I'll be happy to get your views. As I mentioned, the main goal of today's discussion is to get the industry's perspective of what's happening on the EU level. So I would be really curious to hear your views, and also how Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu is getting involved in this big journey, but also what are the challenges that you identify on the pathway to getting this decarbonization of the EU economy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Am I heard well? Yeah? Okay. So thank you for the question. Well, yes, indeed. Industrial Development Agency is engaged in the decarbonization process, but obviously it's not the only task in which we are involved in. The agency, as it says, is the Industrial Development Agency, and we are involved on the different levels of different activities. In terms of green transition, of path towards the decarbonization, we on the one hand side offer some financial instruments that provide the entrepreneurs with, for example, green loans that are dedicated for green transformation and the so-called green investments. But on the other hand side, as the capital group of over 70 companies, we also involve ourselves directly in the decarbonization process by making investments. I think that we will have at the later stage of this discussion, just a few minutes maybe, to talk about the investments that we have already made. Two of them I can mention is the Baltic Towers, the JV made together with renewable industries from Spain, Baltic Towers, and also our Baltic Industrial Group, where we also work for investments for offshore wind energy. We also provide different financial and stated instruments in the special economic zones. Also, we want to not only be involved as the agency, as the organization on our level that directly involves in this decarbonization process, but we also want to be the voice of the entrepreneurs, and we want to translate the language of the European Union, of the European Commission into specific concrete case studies, because this is the language that the entrepreneurs speak to us. This is the language that the entrepreneurs, as Mr. Witucki rightly said, understand, and we have to talk about specific concrete instruments, specific concrete actions, specific concrete actions on the different levels that can create the ecosystem that will boost the development of the entrepreneurs, because the burden of all of those regulations is on their shoulders. And it's our job and it's our role, as I understand it, as the public institution, to facilitate that road towards decarbonization.
Thank you very much, Łukasz. And indeed, I will have also I'll be curious at the later stage to discuss those, in particular, those clean tech projects Rozwój Przemysłu is supervising, the one you mentioned in particular in offshore. But first, I would have a question for Luisa from Business Europe perspective. I think it's great that we have you in the room here, because we are discussing, sometimes I can see only about what's happening in the EU, about the internal, let's say, challenges. But I would be curious to get your views on how this work by the Commission also address the challenges on the global stage, right? And the global challenges either from China or from the US, and how do you see as an organization that is really have this high level and umbrella view on what's going on in the EU?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I think indeed part of the business case that we need to make for decarbonization is ensuring that we remain competitive abroad, not just in Europe, but also abroad. So one of the more important aspects is actually the idea of the partnerships, of course, because we don't have, for instance, most of the raw materials that are critical for decarbonization. So we need to look also for engaging with countries to make sure that we have access to these raw materials. I have to say this is becoming extremely difficult because, of course, the countries that have the raw materials want also to use them, not just export them. They also want to create value added, so they also want to attract investments. So it is becoming a new leverage in terms of negotiation worldwide, access and transformation of raw materials. So this is clearly one important angle, and we know that countries like China that have a big role in the process of transforming raw materials, that are using that leverage and now limiting also exports, and this is creating already disruptions in supply chains. So it is important that we have these partnerships, that we also create a framework that is stable to ensure that we will be able to continue to have access to these raw materials. So that's why trade agreements remain very important, not just the raw material partnerships. We need a trade agreement because we also need to be able to import and export these goods that are important for us. The decarbonization will only play out if we have a market for it in Europe, but also if we have a market for green goods and green technologies in third countries. That is very important. That's why we need the trade agreements. And then maybe the other angle that I want to bring in is the import side. Because of course, we are concerned about potential disruptions in terms of competition in the internal market. This is also part of the Clean Industrial Deal. And of course, if we see disruptions, we need to be able to address them. We have the trade defense tools, and these should be used, of course, but they also should be targeted. Because sometimes we need the imports. We need these products that are more cost competitive to be able to continue to produce in Europe, to invest in Europe. So use trade defense in a targeted manner, ensuring that we safeguard our interest. And final point, we are living in a very uncertain environment. And of course, the global supply chains that we have at the moment are based in the respect of the rules. We have a rules-based trading system with the WTO at its core, but of course actions from, in particular, the US lately are putting in question the respect of these rules. And this is creating a lot of uncertainty for investors, including in the area of the green transition. So it's very important that we try to stabilize the situation. That's why we are, of course, following very closely the negotiations we are currently doing with the US to try to avoid an increase in tariffs. If we have an increase in tariffs in the US, that means that our exports to the US of green goods and technologies will become more expensive. It will also slow down the process of decarbonization in the US. And it could lead to a disruption of trade, meaning that the global market and the EU market will be subject to more imports from countries like China that will be in direct competition with our products and our goods. So it's very important that we stabilize the market, that we maintain the rules, so that this gives the certainty that investors need in Europe, but also in other countries, to continue to do the process of decarbonization. That sometimes is not easy, as other speakers said. Sometimes the market is not there, or the cost is so expensive at the moment that we need to create the market so the prices can also go down.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luisa, for sharing this more global perspective, which is much needed also in discussions in the EU. But now from the global perspective, I would like to go to a little bit more Polish perspective, as we are also in Rzeszów. And we have here today with us Sonia Buchholtz from the leading think tank, Polish think tank Forum Energii, working among others on those topics. And Sonia, I think it was late last year, right, that you published and prepared this very interesting report on industrial decarbonization. So it was linked and a little bit before the Clean Industrial Deal was published, but I wonder, could you share with us your the main takeaways from this very interesting report, but also discuss how some of the topics that were included in the report were addressed in the Clean Industrial Deal, or maybe what is missing from your perspective?
Yes, we have recently also published a paper on examining how the Clean Industrial Deal and its instrument can be designed to genuinely support countries and industrial decarbonization countries such as Poland with quite specific characteristics. And maybe let me share some key insights. First of all, what we see is that EU tools and regulations must be designed in a way to reduce structural inequalities and not to enforce them. And this is first and foremost rule here, because what we see is that both EU Hydrogen Bank and Innovation Fund support tends to concentrate in a ways that it reinforces advantages, because Hydrogen Bank works this way that it supports projects that are closest to the market. So what we see, it in fact requires minimum support to make it happen, but at the same time it poses a risk of deadweight loss. And by supporting countries where the clean and cheap renewable sources are available, it means that there are no longer funds for countries when this transition would be very favorable, but at the same time it's more difficult, definitely. And similarly with the Innovation Fund, in a sense that it has tended to flow towards countries where the R&D ecosystem is already there. And of course, where large companies are ready to participate as soon as to navigate with complex procedures. So this is how the transformation can be accelerated in the places when it's already underway. But Poland is one where it isn't, and at the same time one where it's very much needed. So this is the first thing. Well, the second is that what was already mentioned is that we are dealing with trying to modernize our industry, but also safeguarding the essential manufacturing capacity. So what we see is it's highly unlikely for us to compete on price in terms of energy in energy-intensive industries, but also the space for innovation is limited. So what we need right now is, for example, basic chemicals and steel, flat steel, maybe rolled steel. But this is not a rocket science. This is something that is very basic for many others industries and services, but there won't be a significant technological progress in terms of product. So let's be clear and honest here. But if we want to compete with China or US, it means that we should be pretty clear about the fact that the day that we close the last steel plant in Europe, the prices will skyrocket. We will lose our jobs, we will lose our tax revenues, so the alternative is quite difficult. So we want to support them just to make sure we are avoiding this volatility. But it means also, it raises a question of which sectors and processes should be perceived as should be prioritized, should we be willing to support, for how long and to what extent, because we are using taxpayers' money to cover some surplus, and this is perfectly fine, but we need to be clear in the sense of how much and to what extent. And maybe last but not least, we need to actively coordinate the national industrial policies to make sure we are going in the same direction. Because what we know is that member states differ in terms of industrial strategies, in terms of industrial structures, the industrial processes that are there. So what it means, they will will vary in terms of what is expected for them to make the industrial decarbonization happen. And if we of course we are competing with US and with China, but we are also competing within EU. And let us limit this competition within EU as much as possible, just to make sure we are ready to maintain the industry as much as possible, but at the same time to modernize and modernize it. So these are the key takeaways from our very recent paper on the clean industrial deal.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And it sounds like a lot of challenges, and I share your views in particular on the last point, that it should be more streamlined and trying to really make sure that the member states and the markets work better and reduce the burden. But this is like interesting perspective from the think tank that you are working on. But I was wondering, Andrea, so your presentation was very interesting, and as we all saw, you are like the front runner, and you are carrying out a lot of interesting projects that are already contributing to the objective that the EU identify and put forward. But you had those key takeaways, and you said that we will discuss it now, so I would be curious to get your key takeaways, but also to see what kind of challenges and roadblocks your company is facing, even though while developing those projects, from your perspective, but also when you read the Clean Industrial Deal and what's coming up from the Commission, if there are some like hands-on, in practice, identified challenges that would have to be addressed to make those projects even faster, bigger, better.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I took a few notes as well. But actually, I was just thinking, listening to everyone before I even go to the notes and answer your question more in detail. One thing which is really, I think, extremely important is regulatory certainty, is that we know from an industrial perspective what is going to happen, where should we invest, does it make sense to do X, Y, Z, and not have rules which change every other day and which are dependent on whatever political trend is right now the most important one. And I'm saying that because right now, of course, we have all these we were wondering yesterday, what is the plural of omnibus? I actually don't know. It's a Latin word, so I'll just say omnibuses of all those different initiatives. That's great to simplify and to streamline. That's of course great, but it should not be interpreted in a way that member states then say, oh, okay, but in any case it'll change and it'll be all aligned, etc. So therefore we don't implement I think that would be extremely bad, because we have all of those different measures that came out of the Green Deal before we now have the Clean Industrial Deal, and those measures need to be implemented. If I'm talking about the Energy Efficiency Directive as just one example, which is very closely related also to what we need in order to roll out those different initiatives that I was mentioning earlier, then it's really important that member states implement the Energy Efficiency Directive as it was agreed upon last year, and not wait until maybe there will be an omnibus or whatsoever. So that just as a starting point, maybe also to the Commission, even though it's not exactly related to your DG, but I think, yeah, for industry, that's really important in terms of the regulatory certainty. But then more specifically now in terms of the measures that I mentioned, so just as a reminder, the key takeaway was that we save energy, that we electrify, and that we integrate, like the waste heat, with the waste heat potential, the heat pumps potential, and then things to save energy like variable speed drives. So I think what is underlying here and what brings everything together and what is really crucial to make anything happen is the electricity to gas price ratio. As long as there is a ratio which is far above 2 or sometimes above 3 even, so electricity being 2 or 3 times more expensive than fossil fuel, than gas, we are really lacking a very important driver for electrification. And I think that's at the heart of many of the things I was saying, that we need to make electricity more competitive. And a lot is, of course, then in the hands of the member states, but we need this very strong signal, and we need this to happen on the ground. And that then goes together as well, and that's something I didn't mention earlier, but I think there is a very close link with demand-side flexibility as well. Because if we electrify and if we use more renewables, then we should also find a way to reward flexibility on the demand side. And that's also, we don't see that. Some member states do it. Denmark is an example where all of my colleagues in Denmark, they have this app on their mobile phone and they look, okay, when is the electricity cheap, when we do have a lot of wind, and then they program their appliances accordingly and will charge their car, for example, when electricity costs very little. That's Denmark. In Germany, as an example, I'm German. I think we are light years away from that sort of approach. So just as a very tangible example, but generally speaking, from a principle perspective, that's also what we need, and it goes hand in hand with the electrification. So bring down the electricity to gas price ratio below 2, and compensate and valorize flexibility on the demand side. I think these are 2 really crucial measures. And the third one is to have a much stronger political focus on the integration, sector coupling, and particularly waste heat, because it's such a huge potential. But it's not tackled comprehensively. It's a little bit in the Energy Efficiency Directive, it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, but there is no coherent approach to it. And there we could have guidance, for example. We could again reward it. We could incentivize it. Take data centers as an example. There's a lot of waste heat there. There could be much more incentives to really make this happen on the ground. It's not always about command and control. It can also be about making it economically interesting for the stakeholders. So I think those are my 3 messages: electricity to gas price ratio, demand side flexibility valorized, and waste heat stronger political focus. And I think if we do that, we have a good basis to make those things that I was describing earlier, to make those happen on the ground.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, and it's very precise, those requests from the industry. So maybe back to Mariella. I wonder if you have any comments on those voices from the industry. But also what I would like to ask you is that what I really like with this new term of the Commission, it's really highlighted and emphasized the importance of better regulation, making sure that the Commission discusses with the stakeholders and companies that will be impacted by those regulations, make sure that we're down to earth, I would say, or just stress test the regulations that are coming up, the proposals from the Commission. So the EU Industry Days, I think it's a perfect example and of how it can work in practice. But I wonder if you could tell us also a little bit more from the DG Grow perspective, how you are making sure that this voice will be heard and the requests from the industry are taken into account.
Yeah, with pleasure. I will perhaps start indeed with the last part of your question, because that is indeed, I think, at the core, at our DNA in DG Grow, and my unit in particular that deals with, industry, networks and stakeholders more broadly. Here perhaps to mention very specifically that in all the clean tech areas, batteries, solar, hydrogen, we have dedicated industrial alliances. So they bring together economic players along the value chains, and that enables us to have this direct, weekly or almost daily exchange with industry in these critical areas. Our unit is also responsible for the Industrial Forum, a high-level expert group that advises us on all horizontal priorities when it comes to industrial policy, shaping, implementing with us these important agendas. And perhaps also to mention in this context, because it's also operated by our unit, the work of clusters. I think they are particularly essential with regard to building these clean tech value chains, supply chains here in Europe, and that we can mobilize. We have, for example, we are now building these net zero acceleration valleys. They are basically industrial clusters in specific regions, so local actors that promote the production, manufacturing of clean tech in Europe. And we have dedicated projects also to connect clusters across borders. Here I would like to mention, for example, the Euro Clusters project. It's a 42 million euro project that connects clusters throughout different member states, and we have set with the newest project a specific focus on net zero industries, so to help clusters build these value chains. Indeed, and perhaps also on the other points, I think it's an important point with regard to strengthening our strategic independence, that we also build these value chains in Europe, but also, of course, that we work with our international partners to strengthen our cooperation, for example, when it comes to critical raw materials. And indeed, perhaps also to mention the simplification agenda, really at the core of this commission. We want to simplify our regulatory framework, which was indeed one of the key topics that industry has brought to us. We have started earlier with sustainability reporting, more recently batteries, chemicals, REACH regulation is still in the pipeline. So every month you can expect an omnibus.
Yeah, I heard the expression like it wasn't a tsunami of omnibus, but like a wave of omnibus that are coming up. So we are looking forward to those as well. Unfortunately, we have only 8 minutes left because we can go for hours. I just wanted to check if there are any questions from the audience. But before we have two questions. But first, I would like to ask Łukasz, can you tell us a little bit more about this, I think, success story of what you mentioned, this how Agencja Rozwoju Przemysłu is involved in those development of clean tech, which is a key pillar of the Clean Industrial Deal. And this Baltic Towers project is great. But if you could focus a little bit on the funding part, because this is something that we haven't discussed that much yet. I think it's an important topic, and it will have to be addressed in the coming months also by the Commission with this new MFF, with the Competitiveness Fund, with the Industrial Decarbonization Bank. So I wonder if you could try to somehow link those two topics.
Okay, so I will firstly answer a question, and then if you don't mind, I will make some general comment. So basically, indeed, we, the Industrial Development Agency, are at the level of doing the job, of implementing the projects, of making them materialize. In terms of Clean Industrial Deal and clean tech, we basically are now in the process of investing in Baltic Industrial Group, which provides transformer stations and other infrastructure for offshore wind energy. But also we have this Baltic Towers investment that is a very good example of the public-private investment where Industrial Development Agency invested part of the money along with our private partner from Spain, and this investment is finished. There was a kickoff of the production with the aim of producing up to 150 offshore wind towers a year. Please bear in mind that only in Poland we plan as for offshore wind investments nearly 250 billion zlotys to be invested within next couple of years. We tend to and plan to install between 15 up to 18 of gigabytes of energy originating from offshore wind energy. So this is a very good example that we do not only talk, but we do our job. That we implement what we talk about. But I could speak, of course, longer about another initiatives in terms of decarbonization that agency is involved. I told you already that we do provide some financial instruments. We also have this green energy fund with the capitalization over 300 million zlotys, and we are still in the process of fundraising from both public and private entities. And we are also creating the pipeline of projects to invest. We also, as I said, go with different financial instruments to our entrepreneurs that are in our special economic zones, but we are also thinking very seriously about creating some financial instruments that could especially guarantees for the local entrepreneurs, and this is in the context of the local content, so we could support the Polish entrepreneurs with some guarantees to participate in the value chain, in the supply chain, so they that could go up to this tier, so-called tier 1 and tier 2 level, and scale their businesses up on the more advanced level. One more comment. I know that I have just very short comment, taking advantage of the from European Commission. Yesterday, during the panel, Mr. Marzec from PGE made a very good comment. He said, decarbonization, okay, but please remember that when we were landing here in Rzeszów, I don't know from which way you were landing, but probably we were landing, the same landing path. But on the right-hand side, we saw the Patriot batteries. And it should remind us that, of course, competitiveness is very important. Green industrial deal, clean industrial deal is very important. Decarbonization is very important. But also there are other factors that we can literally touch and see, that we are really on the front line with the war zone, and this decarbonization, of course, is extremely important. We want to be part of it, but decarbonization also has to be placed wisely in the wider geopolitical and European context.
Thank you very much, Łukasz. I think there was one question there, if I see, but please keep it short if possible, because we are running out of time. And if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, I will try. My name is Alfred Middelkamp. I represent the region of Drenthe in the Netherlands, and we are a typical region with typical factories. And we feel, as Ms. Masselink explained, we feel the both challenges that we need to work on. And I totally understand the clean tech part. And this is something that European collaboration has been good at, to connect knowledge and to bring things forward and to have innovation subsidies. But then the other part, the industrial decarbonization, so the factories we always say the factories that make cheese and dog food also need to do that, but then without gas, is more of an acceleration using existing technology and moving forward. And we are also working with heat pumps, and I'm really happy that you bring up the topic of demand-side flexibility, which is a very innovative element, but in a way, the heat pump is nothing new, and we need to speed up the deployment. My question is, how does the European Union address something that is more about speeding up something that already exists rather than being on the very innovative side of a new development?
Okay. Do you want to, but maybe Luisa, if you could, just also, I was wondering from your perspective as a Business Europe, which is, I can imagine that also dealing with those kind of voices from the industry, how you see it.
No, the question, I think, to come back to the question of simplification, decarbonization. I think we need to bear in mind that we have very different business models and very different sectors with their very different needs. So you do have the ones that are at the forefront, and of course they want to deploy as fast as possible the new technologies. But then we have the other sectors that need to decarbonize, so they need to come from transition from old technologies to new technologies, and there is where we have the biggest challenges, because that's where we have the problem of the high energy cost that we need to take into account. And that's where we have the issue of the market uptake, because we have products that are decarbonized with products that are not decarbonized competing. And this is where we have the level playing field issue. So we need to bear this in mind when we talk about regulations. The simplification is basically addressed to these industries that need some time to become more competitive, while at the same time they need to keep in business because they're essential, for instance, in the steel sector. So how we do this, it's not just one answer. We need to look for different answers and make sure that actually the technologies that we have and the investments that are needed are done in a gradual way to make sure that also the older technologies are able to change. Access to investment remains critical for these more traditional sectors.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I'm going to give one last question to Sonia, if you want to share any views on that.
I would like to build upon what was said. Clean industrial deal is a concept when we are going beyond funding, but it is about the building conditions where ultimately at the end of the day, transition will happen and the business will be competitive, but on the market basis. So for some businesses, this is the option of electrification means extremely expensive investment and then extremely expensive operational cost because of this proportion between the prices of gas and electricity. So if it's the subject to business case, then we need to thinking about the whole range of products that supports decarbonization or in narrow sense, in narrow sense electrification, but also to make sure it is a business case for companies that will implement it. So you see this as a business case is one thing, but also the addressing the knowledge gap. And this is a place where institutions can come up with some solutions, because if we're talking about SMEs, the problem is also that industrial decarbonization is extremely difficult in terms of conception and idea and how it is implemented to the specific business process. So I guess there are two layers and both require some support.
Thank you very much, Sonia. If it's last minute comments from Andrea or Mariella, you wanted to say something, Andrea, so but please keep it brief.
Yeah, very short. And reacting to what you were just saying, I think it's about slicing the elephant, as they say. So really do it step by step. And what I really wanted to get across here is, in Danfoss, in our own industrial sites, we would not have done that if there weren't a business case. It was done because the payback was super short, with less than 3 years, and because it helped to achieve those immediate savings. And it was done by slicing it in manageable pieces, saving energy and then moving towards whatever the best solution is in terms of the industrial side. So whether it's a heat pump, whether it's excess heat recovery or whatsoever, but it's about doing it in little steps and using those technologies that help to achieve this fast. And that's where the business case is for the companies, whatever industry. Energy intensive, startup, whatever. It's always the same principle, I think.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think it's a great takeaway and the conclusion of today's discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I still have a lot of questions, but I think we can continue outside the room or during the coffee break. So now I would really like to join me in giving an applause to all of our great speakers. Thank you very much for joining us and for being here with us here today. I think we all agree that it's a very important topic, and I'm really happy that we had the chance to discuss with the Commission the industry's views of that. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you very much once again.